never thought a single whisper could change everything in my life, but that night proved me dead wrong. My name is Daniel. I'm 36, married for 7 years, and I always believed that no matter what storm came our way, my wife Laura and I could weather it together. But the universe has a way of testing even the strongest bonds, and it usually does it when you least expect it. It all started on a quiet Friday evening. Laura and I were in our living room, the dim glow of the lamps casting soft shadows on the walls, the kind of setting that always made me feel at ease. She was sitting on the couch, fidgeting with her hands in that nervous way she sometimes does when something's bothering her. I was scrolling through my phone, thinking about the workweek behind me and the lazy weekend ahead, completely unaware of the storm that was about to enter our home. Then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "Her ex is coming. Stay calm or it's over." For a moment I froze. The words didn't fully register. I looked at her, expecting a joke, some kind of playful trick to test me, but the seriousness in her eyes was impossible to ignore. My heart skipped a beat, not because I was afraid but because I knew that this was one of those moments that would define us. I took a deep breath and smiled, trying to mask the sudden tension rising in my chest. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Calm?" "I'm calm." She gave me a quick, almost imperceptible nod, but the worry in her eyes didn't leave. That was the part that scared me the most. Laura wasn't the type to overreact, and if she was this tense, I knew there was a reason. The doorbell rang almost immediately after. My pulse quickened, but I kept my smile, walking toward the door like everything was normal. I could hear her footsteps behind me, quiet but deliberate, the kind of footsteps that somehow always make you aware of your own heartbeat. When I opened the door, there he was. Standing there in the hallway, looking almost exactly the way I imagined he would, confident, composed, with that faint smirk that spoke of old familiarity and untold stories. Her ex, Mark. I had heard bits and pieces about him, of course. Laura never went into much detail, but I had pieced together the image from her fleeting comments, the small laughs she'd let slip when talking about the past, the way her eyes softened for just a second before she caught herself. Now, facing him directly, I realized that all of those small, insignificant details added up to something more dangerous than I had expected. Mark was more than a memory. He was a reminder of the past that still lingered in the corners of our lives, a test I hadn't known I was signing up for. I extended my hand first, forcing the calm I had promised Laura. "Mark," I said, my voice smooth, almost too smooth. I could see him raise an eyebrow, probably expecting some kind of tension or challenge, but I kept it cool. Laura appeared behind me then, her hand brushing lightly against my back, a subtle anchor reminding me to stay composed. She leaned in just enough to whisper, "Remember what I said." I nodded slightly, letting her words settle like a shield around my nerves. Every fiber in my body wanted to react, to show him, to prove something, but I didn't. I let my smile do the talking, the kind of confident, unwavering smile that masks a storm brewing underneath. The conversation started with small talk, meaningless words about work, about the neighborhood, about weather. Mark laughed at the right moments, nodded at the right moments, but I noticed the undercurrent. He was trying to gauge me, to measure how I handled the presence of the man who had become her husband, the one she had chosen over him years ago. I stayed calm, letting the conversation flow naturally while mentally noting every glance, every pause, every micro-expression. There was a subtle challenge in his tone, the kind that most men would fail to notice, but I caught it. And that was the key. That was the difference between a storm ending quietly and a storm exploding. Laura excused herself for a moment, leaving the two of us in the living room. Now, the tension was almost tangible, hanging in the air like a dense fog. I felt Mark's eyes on me, measuring, analyzing, but I didn't flinch. I poured myself a glass of water, moved to the couch, and sat down as if this was just another casual evening. He smiled, that same faint, practiced smirk, and said something about the old times, about moments that had been light and carefree, that had no weight at the time but now felt like remnants of a different life. I nodded, acknowledged it, but never let myself get drawn in. I had learned long ago that memories have power only if you give them power. Laura returned then, and with her presence the balance shifted slightly. She didn't speak immediately, just stood there watching, and I realized that she was testing both of us in her own way. She wanted to see if the calm I carried was genuine, if my confidence was unshakable, if the life we had built together could withstand the shadow of the past. Mark made a joke about something that had happened years ago, trying to evoke a laugh, trying to see if I would react. I chuckled politely, keeping my tone light, and let him have his moment. Every inch of my body screamed for dominance, for assertion, for subtle reminders of who I was and the life we shared, but I held it in. Laura whispered again, this time so softly I could barely hear her. "Good. You're doing fine. Don't lose it now. I nodded slightly, grateful for her reassurance, but also aware of the fact that this was a game I had to win silently. This wasn't about confrontation. It was about control, about calm under pressure, about showing strength without aggression, about proving that our bond wasn't fragile. Hours felt like minutes as the evening dragged on, small talk giving way to memories, memories giving way to subtle tensions. By the time Mark left, I felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. We had navigated the storm without a single outburst, without a single unnecessary word. And as I closed the door behind him, I realized something profound. Sometimes strength isn't loud. Sometimes strength is measured in quiet endurance, in calm smiles, in the unwavering knowledge that the life you've chosen and built is more important than the ghosts of the past. Laura exhaled deeply, leaning against the wall beside me. Her hand found mine, and for the first time that night I felt her relax. She whispered, "You handled it." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "We handled it," I corrected, because this was never just my test, it was ours. And for the first time in a long while, I realized that the true measure of love isn't in dramatic confrontations or verbal victories. It's in quiet strength, in patience, in trust, and in knowing that together, we could face anything, even the shadow of someone who once claimed a part of her heart.